The lawyer's letter arrived on a Tuesday, crisp and formal, tucked between junk mail and bills. It wasn't addressed to me, but to the estate of Eleanor Vance, with a copy clearly marked for my brother, David. My mother's name. A cold dread, thick and suffocating, settled in my chest before I even unfolded the paper. The weight of it felt heavier than the cheap envelope. It was from a firm I'd never heard of, a name that sounded sterile and impersonal on the thick paper, and the subject line in stark legal typeface read, "Regarding the property at 14 Shoreline Drive." My gut tightened. Shoreline Drive. The lake house. Our childhood sanctuary. The letter stated, in no uncertain terms, that David was initiating legal proceedings to claim sole ownership of the property, citing a supposed oral agreement made with our mother years ago. An oral agreement. A phantom agreement conjured from thin air. The words seemed to leap off the page, each one a small sharp jab. I reread the words, my hands starting to shake. The tremor began in my fingertips and crept up my arms, a nervous energy I couldn't suppress. How dare he? How dare he even conceive of such a thing? The lake house wasn't just a building. It was the scent of pine needles after a rain, a smell so potent it could transport me back to those summers. It was the creak of the wooden dock under bare feet, a familiar symphony of summer days. It was the echo of laughter through the summer evenings, a sound that had woven itself into the very fabric of that place. It was the place where Mom taught me to skip stones, her patient instruction a gentle hum. It was where Dad patiently showed me how to bait a hook, his calloused hands a steady presence. It was where David and I built elaborate forts in the woods, our whispered plans echoing with childish ambition. It was where we swore eternal loyalty, a vow sealed with muddy knees and scraped elbows. It was our shared history, etched into every knot in the wood paneling, every faded photograph on the mantel. And David, my own brother, wanted to rip it away, to claim it as solely his. He'd always been the one who felt entitled, the one who subtly nudged his way to the front of the line, a quiet assertion of priority. But this was a new level of cold calculation, a chilling departure from anything I'd witnessed before. Our parents had passed within a year of each other, a double blow that had hollowed out our family. The grief was a heavy blanket that had settled over us, muffling sound and dimming light. We hadn't had the energy for big decisions, for the painful process of dividing up heirlooms or sorting through decades of accumulated life. The lake house, we'd tacitly agreed, would remain as it was, a shared space, a memory preserved. David had even spoken of wanting to keep it in the family, for our future children if we ever had them. Words. Empty, hollow words it turned out, now exposed for the flimsy facade they were. I sat there for a long time, the letter spread out on the kitchen counter, the harsh fluorescent light illuminating the cold, hard truth. The silence of the house felt amplified, the ticking of the wall clock a steady, relentless beat. I could have called him then. I could have screamed, demanded an explanation, hurled accusations across the phone lines, the raw pain finding an outlet. But something inside me recoiled from that. It felt beneath me. It felt like playing his game on his terms, a descent into the very tactics I found so abhorrent. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this wasn't about the house at all. It was about something deeper, something twisted in the intricate tapestry of our sibling dynamic. It was about control. It was about legacy. It was about David wanting to erase my connection to our shared past, to rewrite our history in his favor, to present a narrative that served only him. Instead of calling, I brewed a pot of strong black coffee, the bitter aroma filling the quiet kitchen, a small comfort against the rising tide of anxiety. The ritual of making coffee, the measured pouring of water, the slow bloom of the grounds, offered a moment of grounding. I picked up the phone and called the lawyer whose name was on the letter. I didn't introduce myself as David's sister. I introduced myself as Eleanor Vance, a co-beneficiary of the estate, a statement of fact that felt surprisingly solid in my hand. I explained, calmly and clearly, that I had received a copy of their correspondence and wished to discuss my mother's property. The lawyer, a woman with a brisk, professional tone that suggested efficiency, agreed to a consultation. Her voice was measured, devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning within me. The days that followed were a strange dance of quiet preparations. I didn't confront David directly. I didn't leak details to our extended family, the urge to enlist allies, to paint him as the villain a temptation. I resisted. Instead, I meticulously gathered every piece of evidence that contradicted his claim. I sifted through boxes stored in the attic, the air thick with the scent of old paper and forgotten dust. I found old photo albums with dates clearly stamped on the back of each image, showing us all at the lake house during the very times David claimed our mother had been exclusively discussing property matters with him. The younger versions of ourselves, carefree and oblivious, were a silent testament to a different reality. I unearthed my mother's meticulously kept journals, their pages filled with mundane entries about gardening and recipes, but also the occasional heartfelt note about our little haven by the lake, always referring to it as ours, never his. These small, personal reflections were powerful in their quiet sincerity. I even found old property tax statements meticulously filed and preserved, all addressed to both my mother and my father, a tangible record of shared ownership. The key, I realized, wasn't to fight David on his fabricated grounds. It was to let the truth speak for itself, but to ensure it had a clear, undeniable voice, a voice that could cut through the noise of his assertions. I remembered a summer years ago, just before Mom got sick. David had been talking about his future investments and how the lake house was a prime asset, a financial opportunity. He'd asked Mom if she'd be willing to revisit some old agreements regarding its ownership, his tone carefully casual, masking a deeper agenda. Mom, always the peacemaker, the one who prioritized harmony, had gently steered the conversation away, her focus shifting to the present joy. She talked about how much she loved seeing all of us there together, how the memories were the real inheritance, a wealth that couldn't be measured in monetary terms. She'd even made a point of saying, her voice warm and resonant, "It belongs to all of us, David. It's our family's legacy." I had been there, sitting on the porch swing, listening to the gentle lapping of the water. I had heard it. My meeting with David's lawyer was a masterclass in controlled revelation. I walked into her polished office, the city noise a distant hum outside, and presented my findings not as an accusation, but as clarification. I had photocopies of everything, neatly organized in a folder, a testament to my methodical approach. I showed her the journal entries, the photographs, the tax records, each item a piece of a larger puzzle. I explained with a quiet sincerity that I hoped conveyed the gravity of the situation without resorting to emotional appeals, that my mother had always considered the lake house a shared family space, and that her journals reflected this sentiment consistently. I mentioned, almost as an aside, my own presence at the conversation years ago where my mother had explicitly stated the property belonged to all of them, a detail I deliberately held back until this moment. The lawyer listened intently, her pen scratching across her notepad, a steady rhythmic sound. She asked clarifying questions, her tone shifting from polite detachment to professional concern as the evidence unfolded. She wasn't looking for drama. She was looking for facts, for the verifiable truth. And the facts, presented without emotion or embellishment, painted a very different picture from the one David had tried to construct, a picture of careful planning and emotional attachment, not of financial intrigue. The turning point wasn't a dramatic showdown, no courtroom theatrics. It was a subtle shift, a quiet recalibration. After my meeting with his lawyer, David stopped returning my calls. He didn't acknowledge the emails I sent asking if he wanted to talk, a deliberate silence that spoke volumes. The legal proceedings, I later learned from my own lawyer, a more experienced woman who had been recommended to me, were quietly stalled. The firm representing David had received my documentation, and the oral agreement suddenly seemed a lot less credible, a lot less defensible in the face of concrete evidence. The social consequences, though silent, were palpable. A few weeks later, I ran into our Aunt Carol at the grocery store. She cornered me by the produce aisle, her brow furrowed with concern, her voice a low murmur. "I heard something about the lake house?" she'd asked, her voice hushed, as if sharing a scandalous secret. I simply said, my voice steady, "David is trying to claim it, Aunt Carol. But Mom always intended it to be for all of us." The look on her face, a mixture of shock and disappointment, was more telling than any outburst, a silent judgment. Then came Uncle Jim, who asked me at a family reunion barbecue, his voice carrying across the laughter and the sizzle of the grill, why David was being so difficult. He'd spent summers at the lake house too, and he knew Mom's wishes, her deep affection for the place and her desire for it to remain a haven for the entire family. He'd heard stories of David's entitlement before, the subtle ways he'd always tried to get his way, but this was too much. He said, loud enough for several people to hear, his gaze direct and unwavering, "That lake house is where we all made memories, Sarah. Eleanor always loved it as much as you did." David never mentioned the lake house to me again. He showed up at holidays as polite and distant as ever, his interactions with me carefully curated. But there was a new wariness in his eyes when he looked at me, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. He knew I hadn't backed down. He knew I hadn't fought dirty, but I hadn't let his fabrication stand, and that in itself was a form of victory. The social ripples spread, quiet but persistent. Whispers turned into knowing glances among other family members. Family members who had previously indulged David's more arrogant tendencies, or perhaps just overlooked them, now seemed to see him differently. The reputation he cultivated, the one of a reasonable, successful man, had a tiny crack in it, a fissure that spoke of greed and a willingness to exploit family bonds for personal gain, a truth now visible to those who chose to look. I didn't need to win in court. I didn't need to see him publicly humiliated. I just needed the truth to be known, to be accepted, to become the quiet undercurrent that shaped how others saw him, and perhaps more importantly, how I saw myself. The lakehouse remained still, filled with the scent of pine and the echo of laughter, a testament to shared memories, not sole ownership. And in the quiet of my own heart, there was a profound sense of peace, a stillness that David, with all his legal machinations and his carefully constructed arguments, could never achieve. The coffee on the counter had long gone cold, but the warmth of the internal resolution lingered. The world outside continued its usual rhythm, but within the quiet space of my understanding, a sense of order had been restored.